No, please go ahead.
I'd like to call the second session to order, please. And I'd like to make a few comments before we invite our speakers. We have an excellent session following from the first, especially the keynote, followed by the future of foresight, establishing a foreground for the discussions that will happen. And certainly the evidence-based STI policy is what presents to us an extraordinarily effective example of how to manage this big transformation that's upon us. And then, of course, a point of view from the Russian experience was very important. So what I like to do is, without taking too much time, say a few words about the foresight in the social context, in the context of the entire society. We are going to have a very fast-paced session, and it's going to cover pretty much 360 degrees, except for health, which is my specialty actually, and the human capital aspects will be treated in the various presentations. What I like to say is that we are all facing a new, an exciting future where hyperconnectivity is at the same time enhancing the human element. The human element from a technology-centered industrial era is asserting itself. It came through the information revolution, and then later on with the artificial intelligence, now mixing with natural intelligence, what I call the age of the mind, is presenting amazing breakthroughs. Groundbreaking surprises are going to happen. So those of us who are in the trench, I'm probably in the minority, working on frontier research that leads to transformative technologies. In my case, it's placing the brain and the body in the loop of technology automation. So, and I can see the amazing potential that it has for paradigm shifts. So with that introduction, I'd like to tell you that I will address these issues in my presentation in the next session. So what I would like to do, without taking too much floor time, I'd like to invite Vисенте Gуаярт. Do we? Okay, so you're here. Welcome. Okay, he's going to give us probably the larger perspective, and this is going to be the new urban paradigm, and that is the new society paradigm, I suppose. So, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this event. So I would like to introduce a little bit my position here in Moscow. I'm the director of the Shukhov Lab that is inside the Higher School of Economics. In fact, the Shukhov Lab is just across the street. When the session finishes, maybe you can walk around and to see young people trying to imagine the future of cities. We have launched a program called Prototyping Future Cities. This is the opening lecture when we were discussing, as you can see in the slide, we were discussing about the future life beyond the Earth, future in the moon, with Foster and partners that were developing the project for the NASA over there. We are trying to merge many disciplines because the future of society is merging disciplines. Always innovation happens in the frontiers of knowledge, and when you are in the frontier of something, you discover something new that you need to merge. We are in the program, for example, we launch a competition, Cities for a Flying Wall. When we talk about the future, obviously we can talk about tomorrow, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, or 30 years. And Interesting thing is that we are now inside the digital revolution. We already smell what is going to happen. In fact, we already know what is going to happen, but many things that we know that they are going to happen didn't happen yet. So the question is how we can think about the future, that future in a positive way. In fact, the first speaker was presenting the 15 global challenges. And the interesting thing is that all those challenges will be solved mostly in cities. So the city or the urban question is not in one of these challenges, but the city, because most of the world population are living in cities. Many of these questions about energy, mobility, etc., will be solved in cities. So architects, we are an engineer, we are designer of the biggest machine ever done by the humanity, that are cities. And when we connect cities, we are living in a kind of urban planet. So the question is what we can do with cities, how we can think about the future in this moment of change. I would like to make a short introduction because my second short introduction is about Barcelona. I was the chief architect of the city of Barcelona in the last 4 years. Barcelona is the city where the word urbanism and urbanization was invented. In the middle of the 19th century, when there was industrial revolution going on, the discussion was how cities should be. And as you can see in the plan of the extension, there was a very direct correlation between new technologies and then an urban transformation. So there were some pioneers at that moment that were thinking about how cities should be described in a rational way. They were thinking about specific questions about mobility and about the public space. Were even using statistic data in order to understand how cities should be. And engineer called Ildefonso that did the master plan for Barcelona. He also wrote the first theory of urbanization. So I mentioned this because this is a meeting related with science, and we many times forget that urbanity is a science, or should be more a science than not a business. Should have some rational background, some rational process of decision making based on evidence and based on scientific facts. In fact, we are translating that book for first time to English and will be presented next week in Barcelona. So 150 years later, the big challenge that we have in front of us is not obviously the industrial revolution, is the digital revolution. How we can merge the physical world and the digital world. How we can organize our cities can be compatible with the digital technologies. And if you see in medicine or in botanics, it's very clear that there is a rational description about the different parts of the human body. And what we have been doing in the last years is trying to have also a rational description of the cities. Because again, cities, when every person in this room could talk about cities, could describe cities in a very different way. And then what we are trying to do is to bring cities to science and to try to be able to define actions, projects, etc., based on information and based on the public interest. So, working with the mayor of Barcelona, we define a new mantra that this is a very radical definition of what a city should be, that say that Barcelona will be a self-sufficient city made of productive neighborhoods at human speed inside a hyper-connected metropolis. Making brief, what we want to mix or to merge is the slow cities and the smart cities. How we can have a better life, walking to work, buying fresh bread every day in the corner, producing our own energy, empowering our business, bringing industry back again to the cities, and in the same time being connected to the world. Because remember that the cities are made by men. Cities are not machines that they live alone, that they are as they are because they should be as they are. Cities are produced in every generation, and we have the opportunity to change it. So to give some few samples of what we did in Barcelona before to talk about the paradigms, the city structure is something we really can decide. So traditionally has been cities were centralized because they were small, and when they were growing in a, let's say, centric way. But now we are thinking that if we apply to the internet model to cities, we should be thinking on a distributed way of making cities. So a great example of a centralized city is Moscow, because you have a radial way to grow. Beijing also could be like this, or even Paris could be like this. So it's not bad to be centralized, but this is what it is. And part of the chaos related with the traffic is because of the physical structure and the functional structure of city. In Barcelona, we have been working, trying to develop a super distributed approach, developing many centers that when you connect, you can rate the emergence in the urbanity. In Barcelona, we have been also developing many projects with radical approach. For example, if we discuss about this many center or distributed city, every square should be an opportunity to gather together. And during the last years, obviously, we made mistakes. In city, we're very good on copying mistakes, that this is one of the few areas where we copy what other people did very bad. No, but we are still doing because we were more like in an intuitive way than not in a rational way. So, but the other good thing in cities is that we have the opportunity to retransform it. So this is the demolition of a highway that we did in the last years, because this was the last big mistake we made 25 years ago, building a big highway or a big highway in the future in what should be the center of the city. So architects, we build and we unbuild parts of the city. For example, when you are able to transform the public space, you generate more public transportations, you generate bigger sidewalks, and this should be directly connected with the future of self-driving cars. Whenever we will have self-driving cars, we'll need less cars. Maybe private cars should be avoided in the same way that horses are almost avoided in the cities. And then we'll think on the transportation in cities as a common or a public good. Innovation districts is another process or phenomenon we have been doing in Barcelona in the last years. The idea of having information in the public space or having internet access as a civic right, in the same way that you don't pay to walk in the streets, maybe you should not pay, and you don't pay for having light in the streets, maybe you should not pay to have access to internet in the streets. Or the idea of how we develop self-sufficient producing their own energy. So the idea that we bring energy, the production of energy to the cities and how we generate this metabolic layer in the cities. And that means that we start to transform with new elements like these energy charging cars in the city, or how we use urban pergolas that are producing energy, or how the facades of the buildings are producing energy, or how finally the people are taking the control of the city again through the representatives, obviously through the mayor, etc., but with a broader implication in the civic life. So in the Institute for Advanced Architecture of Catalonia in Barcelona that I founded 15 years ago, we have developed this idea of the new 10 paradigms. Paradigms are situations that are produced when some discontinuity in the history is happening. And obviously now we are having, with the digital revolution, many potential changes, and we should be able to describe and to address. This one is, we call the megacities and program collapse. As I said before, cities were designed in a smaller scale, and now we are living in huge scale cities. And the question is that there are informal settlements in many cities around the globe. There are huge infrastructure nodes. So the question of how we manage megacities is something new that we need to address. The second paradigm is the infrastructures and the climate change, how we can manage also the collapse of the infrastructures, because as many highways we do, more cars we have and more collapse are the highways, and then we need to do more highways in order to have more cars. And then the question is how we think mobility and how we think on climate change in a completely different way. Because remember that we are talking about climate change because climate change has arrived to cities. We talk about climate change not when there is a storm in the middle of the ocean, but when it hits New York or Miami, or when there is a tsunami somewhere in Asia. The third question is the relationship between public space and the hyper-connected citizen. Citizen is not passive anymore. He's active, and he's active also in the public space and in the cities. The fourth paradigm is related with networks and productive cities, how we can use digital fabrication in order to bring productivity back to the cities, how we can develop a process of reindustrialization, maybe not in the Soviet way with these mono cities, but in a more diversified and people-oriented economy, how we can produce energy and even how we can produce food in cities. What the interesting is today we are bringing the data centers to the North Pole or to the Amazon because they have maybe a better climate, and then we are bringing the food production to the cities. So we are transforming with these huge digital networking systems where things are produced. The fifth paradigm is related with nature, how we bring back nature to the cities, how we produce a process of city renaturalization. The sixth paradigm is this idea of the hyper-region and the slow cities. So how we can create a great life in every corner, in every city in the world. Based on people doing things, selling the right things, empowering the people and empowering communities. The seventh paradigm is related with the world of cities. Some people say that countries today are too small to have global influence, not Russia, but countries today, most of the countries in the world are too small to have global influence, and they are too big to deal with the real problems of the citizens. And that's why we see that the governance of mayors are becoming more and more important. Presidents are dealing with big politics, with war, with energy, whatever, saying no about immigration, and know about refugees, but when the refugees arrive to the city, the mayors take care about them. They need to go to the schools, they need to go to part of the healthcare system. So this question on the governance of the world really now is under discussion, how we bring the decisions more near to the citizens. Paradigm number 8 is related with the real-time data, with the fact that information, remember as Cerda was using statistics in order to understand how cities should be. Now we have a lot of data about everything, and we should take decisions about urban transformation, about urban mobility, based on not on mayors' inspiration or in mayors' business or in business interest, but in the public and common interest based on real information. The ninth paradigm is about the urban forms. At the end, we live in specific neighborhoods, in specific places. It's very different to live in the center of Moscow, to live in the suburbs with these big blocks, or to live in Phoenix, Arizona, in this American suburbia. So let's say the form of the city is also fundamental in order to describe and to define how we live. And the last question, the 10th paradigm, we say is related with the smart city control, or how in these cities that has more information, that has more device, more people connected, how this information can be organized in a rational way, how we are not just managed by the companies, we are just employees or indirect the employees of the big corporations that are managing our data, and we are somehow in the real actors of our own life in cities. So then our vision, my vision about the future is that obviously there are several visions about the future, and one vision is Blade Runner, where there are few people that control everything. There are some robots, even with human form, etc. And there is another version that maybe doesn't have still the movie, but is more based on the people's centered approach. How humans, when we have access to all the information in the world, we are able to be productive again. How we are able to live in an environment where we can produce our food, the energy, the things, and how we are connected to the world with social networks, economy, etc. So how we move to a super centralized world to a distributed world where the networks of things, the network of people, the network of knowledge is what is guiding the decision. So I wrote several books about these ideas. I wrote that book, The Self-Sufficient City. Internet has changed our city, our lives, but it hasn't changed our cities yet. Cities, they grow very slow, but they remain for a long time. So countries can be changed, but cities in general, they don't move from where they are. So cities remain much more than companies. We don't have companies 2,000 years old. Barcelona is a 2,000-year-old city, so cities remain there for a long time, but cities are always changing based on citizens' need. So that's why, the idea that now the digital revolution is still to arrive to the cities and we should take the right decision. I think that that's a great opportunity. I had the possibility to work in Barcelona developing many projects, and now I am here in Moscow in the High School of Economy with some colleagues trying to prototype future cities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was absolutely the best way of tackling now all the other amazing challenges and opportunities that we have. And I thank you very much for setting the stage, because now we are going to go to the next speaker with the digital transformation on the way to intelligent society. So every single one of the speakers has addressed this. Now we're going to have a presentation that will connect it all.
Добрый день, уважаемые дамы и господа. Меня зовут Вишневский Константин. И в своем выступлении я хотел бы затронуть тему цифровой трансформации, рассказать, как цифровая трансформация влияет на промышленность, на производство и какова, собственно, будет роль человека. В последние годы мир стремительно меняется. Возрастает роль принципиально новых технологических решений, которые позволяют не только модернизировать производственные процессы, но и меняют саму структуру производства. Что приводит к появлению новой технологической парадигмы? В рамках этой парадигмы появляются новые рынки. Например, рынок 3D-печати, рынок беспилотных летательных аппаратов. Происходит трансформация достаточно традиционных рынков. То есть, например, развивается та же 3D-печать в сфере строительства. Также расширяется роль сетевых взаимодействий в экономике и снижается трудоинтенсивность производства при одновременном повышении производительности труда. Все это обуславливается переходом к цифровой экономике, которая представляет собой совершенно новый способ самого существования современных экономик, где ключевыми факторами производства являются данные, представленные в цифровом виде. Соответственно, становление и развитие цифровой экономики связано с возникновением и распространением цифровых технологий, прежде всего киберфизических, которые многократно усиливают интеллектуальные возможности человека и обеспечивают ускорение производственных процессов. Цифровая экономика во многом является экономикой данных. Так, объем информации, хранимый в цифровом виде, растет стремительно. С 2005 года он вырос более чем в 60 раз, а через 20 лет ожидается увеличение еще в 750 раз, до 6 с лишним ЙТБ. Скорость распространения цифровых технологий в мире также постоянно возрастает. Так, аудитория проекта Pokemon Go, который взбудоражил весь мир год назад, выросла до сотни миллионов человек менее чем за месяц, за 28 дней. Аудитория же Фейсбука, запущенная в 2004 году, шла к этому успеху долгих 4,5 года. При этом, если поначалу мы оперировали терминами количество людей, подключенных к интернету, количество домохозяйств, пользующихся интернетом, сейчас мы говорим уже о количестве людей и устройств, что обуславливается прежде всего распространением новых технологий, таких как интернет вещей, когда вещи начинают играть все более и более значимую роль в цифровом мире. При этом, если в 80-х годах месячное опоздание выхода на рынок для компании с объемом продаж сотни миллионов долларов в год означало потерю сотни тысяч долларов, то на сегодняшний день убытки от такого запаздывания оцениваются гораздо большими цифрами. За 15 лет жизненный цикл различных продуктов сократился примерно на четверть, на 25%. И в настоящее время час простоя из-за необходимости восстановления данных обходится компании более чем в 300 тысяч долларов. А это означает, что средний ущерб простоя за один инцидент, будь то кибератака, выход из строя программно-аппаратных комплексов и так далее, составляет порядка $1,5 миллиона. Это действительно существенные цифры. Собственно, что же является драйвером трансформации? Одним из ключевых драйверов цифровой трансформации являются цифровые платформы, которые обеспечивают автоматическую координацию и оптимизацию связанной деятельности достаточно большого количества участников за счет вытеснения ненужных посредников. Это приводит к резкому сокращению транзакционных издержек и увеличению скорости осуществления операций. Соответственно, максимальная добавочная стоимость сейчас создается либо в новых отраслях, либо в оцифрованных традиционных. И решающее значение здесь как раз играет рост числа устройств, подключенных к интернету. То есть, по сути, создаются возможности управлять целыми предприятиями с помощью смартфона. А если добавить к этому очки виртуальной реальности, то пазл, в принципе, складывается окончательно. Одним из ключевых драйверов является взаимодействие человека и машины. Соответственно, ключевые технологии, которые определяют цифровую трансформацию, у всех на слуху, поэтому долго на них не буду останавливаться. Это технологии искусственного интеллекта, машинного обучения, распределенных реестров, знаменитый блокчейн, удаленной идентификации пользователей и многие-многие другие. Многие из этих технологий, такие, например, как робототехника, на слуху уже давно, с середины прошлого века. Но долгое время они не имели значительного распространения, и связано это было прежде всего с их значительной стоимостью. Некоторое время назад, перебирая старые книги на даче, я наткнулся на книжку от 1982 года, где рассказывалось про Ковровский механический завод. Так вот, на Ковровском механическом заводе, цитирую, на 1979 году было внедрено 60 промышленных роботов, которые обеспечили снижение трудоемкости более чем на 40%, позволили повысить производительность труда в 3 раза, высвободить около сотни рабочих, и годовая экономия составила порядка 300 тысяч рублей. То есть, да, технологии были, но технологии были достаточно дорогими для обывателя, поэтому их использование было затруднено. Соответственно, на нижней части слайда показаны, насколько существенно снизилась стоимость ключевых технологий, таких как, например, промышленных роботов, 3D-печати, дроны, солнечные панели и так далее. То есть можно говорить, что стоимость этих устройств за последние годы упала в десятки, даже сотни раз, что, собственно, и обуславливает ускорение цифровой трансформации в последние годы. При этом цифровая трансформация заботит сейчас как компании, государства, так и наднациональные органы, такие, например, как ОЭСР или Всемирный банк. И несмотря на некоторые различия в подходах как к определению цифровой экономики, так и к пониманию, что же является результатами цифровой трансформации, в целом все сходятся на том, что цифровая трансформация очень активно затронет как сектора традиционные, так будет способствовать формированию новых секторов. Ну, в частности, на какие сектора цифровая трансформация окажет значимое влияние? Во-первых, все, что касается потребительского сектора. То, что касается цифровой логистики, телекома. Значит, в целом, на период 2025 года экономический эффект, генерируемый цифровой трансформацией, оценивается порядка в сотни триллионов долларов. При этом достаточно значимую роль здесь будет играть переход к экономике совместного потребления под давлением цифровой трансформации. Соответственно, это позволит более эффективно использовать ресурсы, совместно пользоваться инфраструктурой и полностью загружать производственные мощности. И по оценкам, соответственно, объем такой экономики совместного потребления составит порядка 50 миллиардов долларов. И одним из ключевых секторов, на которые цифровая трансформация окажет наиболее значимое влияние, является сектор машиностроения. То есть, как ожидается, в ближайшие годы в машиностроении проявятся колоссальные изменения, которые связаны как раз с цифровой трансформацией, новой промышленной революцией. Соответственно, производство будет становиться безбумажным, безлюдным, то есть более автоматизированным, безотходным и распределенным территориально, то есть децентрализованным. Соответственно, этому поспособствуют технологии компьютерного инжиниринга, которые позволят создавать цифровые модели высокой степени соответствия реальным процессам вместо дорогостоящих натурных моделей. Это позволит существенно снизить производственные затраты. Соответственно, это даст возможность производить кастомизированную продукцию при минимальном расходе материала. Ну вот в частности, там, на горизонте ближайших 5-7 лет ожидается, что количество затраченного материала и материала в готовом изделии достигнет ошеломляющего показателя 1 к 1. То есть сколько ресурсов мы взяли, столько ресурсов и будет на выход. То есть у нас не будет производственных потерь. Также будет существенно возрастать доля сервисного компонента стоимости оборудования. И получит распространение так называемая концепция «продукт как сервис». То есть в ближайшее время будет интенсивный переход к сервисной модели. Соответственно, результатом такого рода изменений станет появление новых бизнес-моделей, которые предполагают совместное использование производственной и информационной инфраструктуры. Ну, в частности, распространение таймшеринга позволит коллективно использовать не только отдельное оборудование, но и целые производственные площадки. Соответственно, на цифровых фабриках будет сформирована новая человеко-машинная инфраструктура, где рабочие места станут гибкими, возрастут требования к квалификации работника, потому что необходимо будет постоянно взаимодействовать с цифровыми технологиями. Но большинство процессов будут автоматизированы и объединены в рамках единого комплекса. Соответственно, на смену фиксированному рабочему пространству придет свободное перемещение по цифровой фабрике, в том числе благодаря технологиям как виртуальной, так и дополненной реальности. То есть в целом можно сказать, что цифровые технологии повлияют на всю цепочку создания стоимости в секторе машиностроения. Цифровая трансформация окажет существенное влияние как на промышленность, так и на общество. То есть на правой части слайда показано, что в среднем цифровая трансформация может привести к существенному ускорению вывода продукции на рынок от 20 до 50% в разных секторах, повысить производительность в разных секторах до 5% и существенно снизит издержки на материалы используемые. Но при этом, несмотря на ряд положительных эффектов, необходимо понимать, что цифровая трансформация неизбежно приведет к отмиранию целого ряда профессий. Об этом более подробно расскажет следующий спикер. Отмечу лишь то, что здесь не все так однозначно. То есть, когда мы говорим о цифровой трансформации, она не только приведет к устареванию, отмиранию ряда профессий, но и также сгенерирует некоторые новые потребности к новым компетенциям, к новым профессиям, например, оператор беспилотника и так далее. Но еще здесь интересным является сюжет, связанный с тем, что, по сути, искусственный интеллект будет выступать своего рода конкурентом человека. По оценкам Института будущего, в сфере производства уже в скором времени порядка 90% задач будут эффективно решаться с помощью компьютеров и искусственного интеллекта. А в сфере управления это порядка 65%. То есть на самом деле это некоторые вызовы для общества в целом и, естественно, для человека. И с учетом достаточно таких радикальных изменений, которые происходят в экономике и обществе, понятно, что, говоря о глобальной повестке, необходимо также думать и о перспективах страны в целом. На этом слайде показана, соответственно, доля России, некоторый потенциал с точки зрения развития передовых цифровых технологий. И как мы видим, что в принципе резервы для роста здесь у России колоссальны. То есть, что касается промышленных роботов, то здесь отставание наблюдается в несколько сотен раз. Соответственно, в 2015 году было закуплено порядка 500 промышленных роботов. Далее этот показатель даже снижался. И сейчас составляет порядка 350. По большинству других направлений, таких как, например, аддитивное производство, суперкомпьютеры и так далее, соответственно, доля России составляет от 1,1 до 1,5%. И, соответственно, возникает вопрос, а, собственно, как же можно вот в этой глобальной цифровой экономике все-таки повысить эффективность и максимально извлечь выгоду из цифровой трансформации? И ответом на этот вопрос является молодежь. То есть, в принципе, если даже посмотреть данные Евростата по уровню владения современными информационными технологиями, цифровыми технологиями, здесь можно наблюдать, что молодежь здесь является несомненным лидером. Соответственно, когда несколько лет назад наш институт проводил исследования по оценке готовности и восприятия новых технологий, то здесь опять же можно наблюдать, что в среднем на 10-15% людей, если сравнивать популяцию в целом и молодежь, а молодежь более восприимчива к новым технологиям, будь то дистанционный врач, умный дом или робот-помощник. И, соответственно, поэтому я хотел бы немножко остановиться на том мероприятии, которое прошло буквально несколько недель назад. Это Всемирный фестиваль молодежи и студентов. Это мероприятие, которое проходит раз в несколько лет в разных странах. Вот в этом году оно было в России и собрало более 25 тысяч участников из 185 стран. Соответственно, было сформировано 12 тематических треков образовательной программы по самым разным направлениям. Высшая школа экономики курировала блок, касающийся экономики будущего развития. В рамках этого блока отдельно были выделены активности, связанные с форсайт-сессиями, где приняли участие более 70 участников из 11 стран. И в течение нескольких дней была проведена достаточно плотная работа по выявлению важнейших трендов глазами молодежи, рынков, продуктов, технологий, потенциальных прорывов. А также было рассмотрено ожидаемое место человека во всех этих активностях. Сразу скажу, что изначально мы не фокусировали ребят на цифровую трансформацию, но уже по итогам первых же обсуждений, это показано на верхней картинке слева, тематика цифровизации вышла на первый план. Естественно, на пленарной дискуссии мы спросили у ребят, соответственно, какие же тренды они считают наиболее значимыми, наиболее важными для них. Для этого мы им предложили целый ряд различных опций, как достаточно традиционных, как без работы и забот, например, так и относительно провокационных, связанных, например, с эрой пожилых, когда за счет активного развития технологий продления активного долголетия, соответственно, миром правят люди в возрасте. так как у них есть компетенции, у них есть знания, и теперь у них есть еще отличное здоровье, которое позволяет им долгие-долгие годы, соответственно, управлять. Как ни странно, эра пожилых не вызвала значительного отклика у ребят, но, соответственно, первое место заняло все сюжеты, связанные с усовершенствованием человека, так называемый человек 2.0. То есть порядка 41% ребят говорят, что главный запрос и главный тренд – это те технологии, которые позволяют улучшить возможности человека. Ну, например, там различные нейроимпланты. Также значительный интерес у ребят вызвали темы, связанные с криптовалютами, которые приходят на смену национальным валютам. Новая цифровая конституция, права для роботов и искусственного интеллекта, а также переход к сетевому обществу, когда постепенно происходит уход от корпораций и развивается в первую очередь предпринимательство. По итогам форсайт-сессий стало понятно, что в центре будущей экономики, естественно, должен быть человек, вокруг которого концентрируется все, что связано с новыми технологиями, обществом и, соответственно, с экономикой. По мнению ребят, первопричиной всего развития станут цифровые навыки и компетенции в области новых технологий, которые позволят поставить технологии на службу обществу. При этом один из тоже интересных трендов, который был выделен, это производство продукции исключительно по заказу и на месте. То есть уход от массового производства, переход к кастомизированному производству just in time. Соответственно, тема, которая больше всего заинтересовала с точки зрения общества, это все, что касается переменчивого образа жизни, flexible, и кастомизации образования, кастомизации всего. Соответственно, экономика, по мнению ребят, здесь на английском языке, конечно, это более красиво звучит, как 3D экономика, но мы постарались, опять же, эту тематику сохранить. То есть экономика, которая драйвится цифровыми технологиями. То есть, в принципе, резюмируя все вышесказанное, мы можем сказать, что человечество сейчас двигается к децентрализованной, персонализированной экономике, где человек будет центром экономики. Соответственно, были сформированы 3 ключевые темы, которые определяют цифровую трансформацию. Это человек 2.0, это все, что касается цифровой республики и образа жизни в стиле flexible. Какие здесь интересные сюжеты были тоже выделены ребятами? Во-первых, это так называемое adding up образование, когда с помощью новых технологий человеку не надо каждый раз с нуля начинать свой образовательный и карьерный трек. Соответственно, какие-то базовые знания он может просто получить через новые технологии. Во многом это также завязано на носимую электронику, которая будет имплантироваться прямо в человека. Соответственно, большое значение приобретут вопросы человека-машинного взаимодействия, а также коммуникации не только мозг-компьютер, а также мозг одного человека, мозг другого человека. Ребята сказали, что в принципе они даже рассматривали себе такой вариант, как переход от частной собственности к так называемым арендным домам. То есть действительно они готовы достаточно часто менять место жительства, путешествовать, и поэтому концепция, которая сейчас активно обсуждается как возвращение к арендным или доходным домам, также находит отклик у ребят. Соответственно, с точки зрения цифровой республики, цифровой конституции получили большое такое признание тематики, например, связанные с цифровым судом, когда искусственный интеллект определяет, соответственно, виновен человек или нет, и так называемая цифровая полиция. Поэтому права для искусственного интеллекта и права для роботов, опять же, здесь приобретают очень большое значение. Но, наверное, одна из самых смелых, одна из самых интересных идей – это идея так называемого рейтинга, социального рейтинга. Идея, в принципе, не нова. Вот возникло ощущение, что на фестивале молодежи и студентов идея, буквально захлестнувшая умы ребят, она возникла из футуристического известного сериала «Черное зеркало». Но на самом деле такие рейтинги в целом ряде стран уже разрабатываются. Например, в Китае в пилотном режиме тестируется такой социальный рейтинг 8 крупными компаниями, одна из которых Alibaba. А теперь, собственно, представьте новый мир, где повседневные занятия постоянно отслеживаются, оцениваются. Что вы покупаете в магазинах, где вы были в конкретное время, с кем вы дружитесь, как и с кем вы общаетесь и так далее. То есть рейтинг учитывает, например, кредитную историю человека, оплачивает ли он вовремя счета за электричество, за телефон, насколько успешно человек исполняет обязательства по контракту, насколько он позитивно и адекватно общается. И такой, например, сюжет, как поведение и предпочтение. То есть предпочтение в плане покупок становится своего рода характеристикой человека. То есть если человек играет по 10 часов в день в видеоигры, он считается малоподвижным. Если кто-то покупает детское питание, то система, например, считает, что этот человек, скорее всего, является родителем. За высокий рейтинг, естественно, есть некоторые бонусы. То есть можно взять кредит на льготных условиях, сделать ускоренную регистрацию в аэропорту или, например, совершить поездку без визы. У людей с низким рейтингом, напротив, будет медленнее работать интернет, они не смогут посещать какие-то избранные рестораны, соответственно, у них будет более высокая ставка по кредиту. Но важно, чтобы вот эти алгоритмы не стали работать слишком исключительно. Например, один человек может не оплатить счет, потому что он попал в больницу, а другой будет намеренно уклоняться от выплат. Собственно, в этом проблема всех обитателей цифрового мира. То есть, если мы перейдем на алгоритмы, которые определяют нашу жизнь, то есть важно, чтобы они учитывали какие-то тонкости, присущие людям. То есть возникает проблема морального выбора для искусственного интеллекта. И в этой связи, на самом деле, вспоминается так называемая проблема вагонетки, троллей проблем, которая была впервые сформулирована еще в 1967 году. Идея в том, что тяжелая неуправляемая вагонетка несется по рельсам. На пути ее следования 5 человек, которые были привязаны к рельсам сумасшедшим философом. Есть возможность переключить стрелку, но тогда вагонетка пойдет по другому, запасному пути, на котором, к сожалению, тоже находится человек. Собственно, вот эта проблема обретает новый смысл с развитием беспилотных автомобилей. То есть программному обеспечению, по сути, искусственному интеллекту придется столкнуться достаточно с непростым выбором, соответственно, куда направить на автомобиль. И здесь ключевой вопрос, на основе каких алгоритмов автомобиль должен совершать выбор. То есть одно из таких самых смелых предложений, он должен совершать выбор с точки зрения вот этого социального рейтинга. Но согласитесь, что звучит достаточно дико. Поэтому, наверное, главный вопрос, который вот за всей этой цифровой трансформацией звучит, что мы должны, естественно, поставить во главу...
could you please wrap up, because we're falling behind? Yes, please. Thanks.
Мы должны поставить во главу угла интересы человека, и тогда мы точно перейдем к интеллектуальному или в терминологии коллег из Японии суперинтеллектуальному обществу, то есть от индустрии 4.0 к обществу 4.0. И на этой такой слегка провокационной ноте я хотел бы сказать спасибо большое за внимание.
Excellent presentation, and you have stolen some of my thunder from the presentation that I was going to make, so I'm going to skip those parts. The human-centeredness of the future is absolutely what's upon us, and this is facilitated by this digital transformation. We will immediately move to our next speaker. Please, our next speaker is here. Yes. Our next speaker, Fabьen Gu-Bodiman. She's going to talk about the future of jobs and skills. That comes absolutely as the perfect segue for the previous as well as the future presentations. Please.
Thank you. Well, I will not exactly speak of this, but okay, let's see.
Okay.
First of all, I would like to address the very topic of this session, which is about grand responses to grand challenges. And if this 7th conference of Foresight is about that, it is mainly because the main trouble maybe are not on the challenges we are all focusing on, but on the way we respond to those challenges. And that's why I would like to introduce the idea that maybe our way of foresighting is not exactly the right one, and maybe we have to put the emphasis on something different. And I will use the notion of the future of jobs and skill as a case study to exemplify it. First of all, maybe we have to consider that what is missing right now in all our efforts of foresighting the future, whatever job skills or digitalization or cities or whatsoever, is the need of a global overview. An overview is the first way to build a systemic comprehension, understanding of what is happening really. Because we are living in a very interdependent world, we all use the words, but we don't know exactly what does it mean. I mean, when we think of jobs, we are just thinking of skills to get jobs and automation, which is really threatening our jobs. But that's it. We do not think of demography. We do not think of the evolution of the labor force. And we do not think of what our children are really desiring about their life, about the meaning of what they will do tomorrow. So my point is about the first thing is to get a big picture of what is really happening about whatever topic we are considering in the future. The second hypothesis or assumptions we need is to understand that we are really in a VUCA world. The VUCA world is the images you have in front of you. We are living a world, whatever the number we put in, but let's say we are living a world that during at least 10,000 years has been built on the same structures, which are industrial structures, and even our industrial system is still based on this agricultural system with a specific classes, social classes, with a specific way to go up and down those classes, with hierarchy, with a lot of things characterizing this world 1.0. Obviously, we are in this very specific period of time called a great transition. When you are in a great transition, it means that you are moving from not only a paradigm, we use a lot the word paradigm, but it's not only a paradigm, it's really about a worldview, a way to conceive the world and to act inside this world to a very different one, and maybe with no real continuation. And this drawing in front of you, where humanity is this man. I mean, it's just a metaphor, but it's just to understand it. Humanity is just right now between two worlds. One is a 1.0, I mean, this 10,000 old world based on agriculture, and the next one is about something we don't know. The only thing we know is that it will not be based on the same agricultural specificities. And this grand transition began at least 1 century ago, at the end of the 19th century, at least in the north, and will probably last until the end of the 22nd century. So the question is, how do we cope with the fact that right now we are under two so different systems that we could not even imagine the laws of the one to come? So how to face the fact that this VUCA world, right now, which is very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, is just making all our prerequisites completely out of date, completely obsolete, even without we are making any decision. And finally, maybe the last component of this era is the fact that the world now is a real scale. It is our scale of thinking. We are all together here in an international place. And when I listen to people coming from Russia or Catalonia or England or whatsoever, I mean, we have all the same way of thinking. We all understand that something is happening, that there is a main shift undergoing, but we don't know how to face it. And the only thing we have to face it is our background. I mean, it is a 1.0 world, because we have all been educated in this world and with this framework. So if we accept the idea that the world is a scale, we have now to think at the scale level, at this new scale level, and not only at the regional level, at the country level, or at the continent level. Now the thing is, most for futurists are designing the very near future. Why? The first reason, I mean, let's say the obvious one, is the fact that we are all working, I mean, academics a little bit less, but still, we are all working with public or private sectors asking us for immediate results. And yet we all know that we cannot think and we cannot do properly our job at the short, even middle term. What we are bringing to all the specialists of the different fields is the fact that futurists are able to think at a very, very long term and in a structural way. So macrohistory is definitely part of our foresighting process, because we need to study how change occurs in our world and how human beings cope with change. And this is really something which is really missing today in foresight. The second thing is that transformation is more than just making scenarios. Scenarios are imaging of the futures, and they are biased by our subjectivity. Recognizing this means that we are able to develop a very transformative way of applying these images of the future to the future we want to build. I will come back to this later on. And finally, the third one is about preparedness. Because foresighting the future is very interesting just as a play of the mind, but if it is only that, it wouldn't need, I guess, that we convene all today and tomorrow. What we need is ways to help decision makers and people and citizens, inhabitants, whoever, to get prepared to alternatives. And this is the point. Not to the future to come, because none of us know absolutely anything about the future to come, but about the fact that we can decide what the future will be if we are prepared to different possibilities and ways to implement them. And so finally, with a kind of deep understanding meaning a very structural understanding of the phenomenon, and a pragmatic proposition, we could be able to change maybe the world itself. And in this case, the futures of jobs and skills. All of us, I mean, I guess since the publication of the Brezhnevson and McAfee report on the second machine age, have heard of the future of job. We are all writing papers and whatsoever about the fact that the new world, this 2.0, is a very different world, could be a world jobless. If you are Christian and you think that, oh my God, not having a job or proper work is really something that will drive on you nuts, well, it's it's a value position. But if you are just a youngster and you think, wow, I will not have to work in my life, wow, wonderful. You see that we cannot, as scientists, we cannot just stop at this kind of vision, thinking that this is good or bad. And right now, this is the point with this topic. This topic is not fully examined, studied, and developed so that decision makers can really make their decision knowing what they are doing and what they will do for the future as well. Because right now, they are buying machine and they plan to substitute machine because this is a competitive world. And in a competitive world, there is no question. If you work with some people in the retail or any other kind of industrial sector, you will see that they don't question our own assumptions. Just they have to be competitive, so they have to substitute. There is no point. Yet, this is not what we want. We are all here thinking of our children and thinking of the fact that, well, could they live in a jobless world? Will this be good or not for them? Okay. So now the real point is how to shift from this very emotional way of looking at the future and try to understand, deeply understand. And if we, first of all, recognize that we are in a VUCA world, then you can imagine this era as an era of subduction. You know, subduction in geology, it is one layer, yeah. One layer is going under another one. Let's imagine that the world 1.0 is the one going under the 2.0, which is emerging. When the two layers are conflicting, you have earthquakes, you have volcanoes, you have all these kind of events that are happening right now and that we don't know how to explain that. You have a very strong resistance developing in order to counterbalance this emergence of the 2.0. And so many people today will just give their opinion or an idea about that without expliciting really what are the assumptions behind a solution or another. So maybe the first thing we can do as futurists is to explicit, as social scientists, what are the real underlying assumptions of any position or discussion we have about the future of, that's a good one, the future of jobs and skills. And as an example, I would like to introduce you to this way of thinking, which is, let's use the modern, what we call modern paradigm, which is about the 19th century, 20th century, and the postmodern paradigm, which would be 21st century. Job in the modern paradigm is about getting a paid work because it is about survival. But not only survival, it is also about recognition. It is about social survival. The fact that you are recognized and that your career will be your life. If you have to have a good life, you have to make a career. And to do so, you have to show specific skills. And skills are given by higher education and diplomas. And implicitly, our assumptions here are that, well, power and money are the basics of this world, and competition and recognition are what an individual is looking for. But if you look at the postmodern paradigm, it's very different. Job is still a paid work, but in this case, it is really what you would want to do just to earn your life and to really benefit of your life as you want. It has nothing to do with social recognition, because your recognition is elsewhere. Your value, I mean, what you are doing of your life is no longer in your career. It's in the fact that you are able to balance your private and your professional life. And so the skills, of course, are not the same anymore. You do not need diplomas or this long career going from let's say, the license to doctorate. But we are just about moving from what you need to do what you want. You can take a MOOC, you can go any kind of alternative education, even without a diploma. And the implicit behind is that we are shifting from this idea of a hierarchical pyramid that you have to climb up to a place where, well, it's kind of better to live hidden, because if you are hidden, you are happy. You will not have responsibility. You will not have to stay at work for hours after the normal hours. Well, it's about well-being. It's about not suffering of your current job. Now, if you move to the second step, which is anticipation, most of our different images of the future are anchored in the same worldview, in the same model. If you want to really create different images, you have to change the original model. Because it is not different, it just, you move the cursor from one indicator or another one. A differentiated image is not about just a PNB, two or 3 points of PNB, more or less. It's really about values, and the different values are, again, underlying our images of the future. And again, if I use the future of jobs and skill, what you can see is in the post-normal time images of the future, you can have the scenario of Uber, for example. Uber is about being self-employed as an individual. You are part of a group, but you can go in and out of the group as you want. And what you need is no longer a diploma or something like that, or even a higher education. It's just to know to do what you do. If you want to be a driver, you just need to drive. And the implicit here is more about self-confidence and freedom. You can manage your time. You can work like you want. If you take a second image, post-normal times image, it would be, for example, the universal basic income. In this case, job is whatever self-imposed activity you want. You may want not to work, and so you can work. Or you can do absolutely whatever you want. And skill here, it's just about developing your talent. Developing what, if you want to learn Russian, for example, just, okay, dedicate 2 years to learn Russian. You will not have to do it because you want to work in Russia, or because to. It is not about because, it is about the deeper understanding of what you are. It is about self-awareness. So of course we cannot understand this fully because we are not wired for this way of thinking. And so we have definitely to leave youngest people who are maybe a little bit more wired for this to deliver a better vision of these futures. But still, what we can do, even if we are kind of old-wired, is to try to think in terms of transformation. How we move from yesterday, I mean this 1.0 world, to a 2.0. What are the main differences? And really ask ourselves if these differences are what we want or not. For example, you know that most of artificial intelligence will replace, in the very near years, white collars more than blue collars. And this is the very reason why we intellectuals are thinking about it, because we didn't think when it happened with the blue collars. But white collars, we feel concerned. So suddenly, oh, that's a grand challenge. And it is grand because we are concerned. but most of us here have already most of their career behind them. So we are talking about the youngsters ones, those who will work in this field. And so we have to ask ourselves what we know about them, what we know about their desire of social values, about performance, what about their belongings? Do you feel they belong still to family or to affinities? About their communication, we are moving from a punctual to a continuous communication. So definitely we have to move. We have to change our images of the future to images that are more representative of those who will work in this world, and not just trying to make a copycat of the former world to the new one. So I will conclude with the third steps of any kind of futuring method, which is about proposing. To elaborate grand responses, we have definitely to explicit our common implicit, which are usually about our social values. We have to define a vision concordant with our core values and aims. Doing so, if again I use the future of jobs and skill, we can see that, for example, we can either leapfrog or disrupt. If we identify the challenge, the grand challenge, as being the fact that we will have artificial intelligence-based activities, then the response may be to help the South countries, for example, or any kind of developing countries, to skip the industrial age and move directly to the quaternary sector, which is the sector of artificial intelligence and digitalization. But who is ready to do this? Right now, our only word to developing countries is just follow the path that we have had and just continue to industrialize. Don't look at digitalization, it's too early for you. Is that really efficient? Is that performant? No, we can also imagine a very different disruption that would be about the fact that, oh gosh, artificial intelligence is becoming autonomous. Let's imagine it will be solar powered, it will be spread on the blockchain, and we cannot do anything. That's it. So what? Where is here the grand challenge? It is the fact that we are no longer the dominant species on Earth. So what? We will try to cope with the enemy, as so many people try to do in time of war, because we have to cope with the reality. Or shall we decide to have a war against machines, like so many science fiction movies? Or what? Will we transform ourselves in machines so that we can better compete? You see that the social dimension of foresight is a real underlying dimension of the fact to think the future. Technology is just part of the superstructure, but infrastructure is really about the fact that we are human, and we as human, we are creating the world in which we are living. There is no deus ex machina. There is no technology coming from the moon or some alien. We are producing the technologies that today we are considering as being the main challenges. So what? Are we unable to control what we are doing? That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, this speaker has stolen some more of my thunder about emerging economies, but I'm presenting it as an opportunity for emerging economies to truly go leapfrog into the new world. Another thing that I'd like to add at this moment that will come back at the next session is the human element. There is an underestimation of the potential of the human genius. The human mind and the human dreams and the human imagination is endless. That's an endless resource. And this is what is missed in those conversations between artificial intelligence can only, because we're obviously those who are in this thing, can only replace transactional, procedural, process-based stuff. Imagination that is endless, borderless, is not part of the design unless somehow we also go through another transition. So let's be very hopeful, because the human-centered thinking means also that human genius is going to truly tame the machine, tame the AI, to respond to those challenges that you're talking about. And that's our hope. But we are not going to delay further, and we are going to bring Kristofer Kordei. He's going to talk about the cybersecurity talent and how to build capacity, please.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Chris Kordei. I'm Swiss. I'm consulting on foresight strategy next to teaching mainly on change anticipation to a DBA and MBA student in Switzerland and Eastern Europe. My background is in business administration, and I've been working for the last 25 years in the corporate world or private sector. Since 2008, basically, my interests focus on cyber security and cyber insecurity, singularity, human enhancement, with the aim to better understand the future implication of STI on society. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you very much, Alexander, for inviting me. What I would like to do is during the next 15 minutes to have a dive on the topic cyber security education, looking at the future and current challenge. Don't expect a technical presentation on cyber, but rather the initial result of an horizon scanning exercise, which initial findings might enrich our discussion. My view is that cyber insecurity is a global challenge. Even more, is it considered by some scholars as an existential threat. Sorry, it's coming. What I would like now is my initial assumption is that cyber attacks and cybercrime will shape the internet and our relationship to it. New technologies bring new level of interconnectivity and with them new vulnerabilities and cyber threats. Cyber attacks will only grow in terms of scale, scope, frequency, and impact in the future. Governments are strengthening the adoption of various protective measures such as technology, policy, and enhancing international cooperation. Cybersecurity education, training, and workforce development is one of them. But my question is how robust and future-proof are the existing cybersecurity education, training, and workforce development ecosystem? Which research topic should be considered to ensure countries' future cyber resilience, which is the ability to anticipate and adapt before disruption, and which role the international STI foresight community could play in that respect? Are we eventually heading, and excuse me for the translation, that's a Google translation. Are we eventually heading to a world where computer algorithms are capable of predicting and manipulating people's behavior with a high degree of accuracy? Where economic collapse puts our private information on the market to speculators and criminals? Where wearables devices track our thoughts and emotion, leaving us vulnerable to surveillance, hacking, and blackmail, where the IoT or soon the IoE will take control of more and more of our lives, and where widespread distrust of institution security results in the wild west of lawlessness. I mean, this is one of the four scenarios imagined by the Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity in Berkeley University. Basically develops and shapes cybersecurity research and practice based on a long-term vision of the internet. If we are looking to the various challenges of cybersecurity at large, they are multidimensional and multifaceted, ranging in a random setting from the availability of military-grade cyber weapons on the dark web, from the changing profile of attackers. I mean, we are now the generation Z is entering the war, let's say, this sector, let's put it that way. New vector, new threats, new vulnerabilities. There's a relevant or relative international collaboration on cyber governance. There's a recurrent discussion on privacy and security and net neutrality. Budget for cybersecurity within the private sector and the public sector are not at the necessary level. There's a relative cybersecurity hygiene among the general population. And there's an adapted higher, basically education system, which leads to cybersecurity talent shortage and skill gaps. And the reality is that the current cyber landscape certainly benefit the attackers. On top, to add to this initial challenging panorama, the cybersecurity ecosystem and value chain is quite complex and fragmented with different stakeholders, sometimes with conflicting interests. Additionally, the future cost, as it was mentioned before, of data breach and cyber attacks might reach trillions of dollars if cybersecurity doesn't keep the race. A recent survey done by McKinsey among 400 cyber experts from Germany, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States indicate a critical gap between perceived priority and the level of preparedness. 75% say that IoT security, specifically IoT security, is either important or very important, and that its relevance will increase. But 84% say their company is not prepared for the challenge, mainly due to insufficient budget allocation. Even more, more than one-third of companies lack a cybersecurity strategy that also covers the IoT. As cybersecurity is becoming a very complex, fast-changing new disciplines, the biggest challenge in terms of education seems to come from the supply side, ranging from, again, this is an observation, ranging from inadequate preparation of cyber educator, inadaptability of the cyber course. There is seemingly a lack of interdisciplinary higher education curriculum, challenging training programs, standardization, taxonomies, and so on. On the top of the prevailing rather in brackets, macho image that the cybersecurity field have, which might deter some graduates and mainly female graduates to start a career in this field. Now, if we are looking to the various initiatives which have been put in place, and if we're moving our lens to unearth some best practice of protective measure, the US national, this is a one from the US, they put in place the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, is quite worth mentioning. Their mission is to energize and promote a robust network and an ecosystem of cybersecurity education, training, and workforce. It aims to define a common, consistent lexicon to describe cybersecurity work by categories, specialty areas, and work role, and detail the necessary key SA or knowledge, skills, and ability. And it even developed building blocks to educating a specific vision of educating a capable and ready cyber workforce. And I'm sure that the US is probably not the only country with such initiatives. Another US initiative is the one done by the NICERC, which aims to foster integrated curriculum experiences across multiple disciplines in primary, secondary, and post-secondary environments. Basically, NICERC provides hands-on professional development curricula, programs, and competition to engage students in STEM discipline. One of its objectives is to serve as a catalyst for future research in cyber education. At the higher education level, one can observe the emergence of interdisciplinary cybersecurity curriculum, including computer science, criminology, cybernetics, Israel, ethics, statistics, social science, brain science. I haven't seen anything for the time being about foresight. For raising the general population cyber awareness, something to mention is the European Cybersecurity Month, which is organized for the last 5 years every October. Other activities can be mentioned in Singapore or in Israel, and even in Australia and again in Israel. They are building what we call the cyber innovation cluster around cybersecurity innovation. New technologies bring new level of interconnectivity, and I think that the rapid growth of the IoT is changing the game. Thus, the combination of the availability of military-grade cyber weapons to the growing numbers of IoT units on the market, to the million of the people who will enter the cyberspace without necessarily a cyber culture, might prove to be a time bomb and, unfortunately, an El Dorado for offenders. Other technologies might also increase the level of vulnerabilities and cyber threats. And we have been talking about genomics, about genetics engineering, about nanomachine, human enhancement, aside of the obvious AI, drones, and 3D printings. In doing this short analysis, I found an interesting research project funded by the European Commission under the 7th Framework Program, which is Cyber Road. It's a program that aims to identify current and future issues in the fight against cybercrime and cyberterrorism, to draw a strategic roadmap for cybersecurity research. Again, and this is just an observation, it seems that this roadmap does not integrate at least cybersecurity education or in these fields as a research topic, but I might be wrong. If we look at the key priorities, again, this is not an exhaustive list. I think that setting up and then energizing and promoting a network and an ecosystem of cybersecurity education, research, innovation, entrepreneurship, and private sector might be a solution. I've heard, I think, someone talking about this cluster or this center of excellence. Okay, next to changing the population and the workforce behavior and allocating necessary resources to ensure that all initiatives are directed towards what I call here cyber resilience. In terms of research, I mean, the four first one are the research topic that are being considered by the Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity at Berkeley, which is the cyber talent pipeline. It means this is on the list. Cybersecurity or security implication of AI and ML, as it was mentioned. New cybersecurity governance, protecting vulnerable individuals and organizations. Maybe some others might be about the cyber resilience, cyber implication or security implication of internet fragmentation, or even further, the future implication of the disruptive technology, AI, or even quantum computer on the global cybercrime and cybersecurity ecosystem, or even the cybercrimes of the future. What will be the AI-related crimes when two robots or two black robots will interact? Finally, the AI, the machine learning, enabling cybersecurity curriculum, training, and workforce development programs, how we will be able to use them, or technology as an alternative to cybersecurity educator, professors, and trainers. Okay, these are just an initial list of potential research topic, and I'm sure that some of them might be already part of the research agenda. I totally agree that my presentation has some limitation. It means that it was only an overview of an initial horizon scanning. But I think that the foresight community, this is our responsibility and accountability to look specifically on the STI implication, the positive, of course, but as well, I mean, the negative one. I'm a very strong believer to continues to integrate foresight and most probably cybersecurity or cyber resilience, how you want to call it, into the education system. from primary. And I've been working in the primary and secondary sector as well. And I think this is, according to me, critical. Cybersecurity education as a research topic, maybe why not? And I think that this element of cluster, a cybersecurity resilience culture, cluster, integrating research, innovation, education, entrepreneur, and the private sector, the large organization as well. But I guess that if we are moving to what is, this society 5.0, I like the super intelligent society. I guess that the implication of SIT, of science and technology on society will be major, complex, critical, and in scope and impact. And then maybe we have to re-challenge the way we look at security and the way we look at cybersecurity, and probably some of the insight of Fabien's insight might be used to reconsider, yes, exactly the way we look on these two issues. Thank you very much for your attention.
You have certainly addressed very, very important issues in talent and capacity building, but also you have addressed this very open and quite concerning aspect that regulatory systems, the governance doesn't exist yet. And in the meantime, we have huge operations such as Facebooks and Googles and Amazons who have literally mined everything cyber without any regulations. And those of us who study attention know that they are literally monetizing attention, and we're calling them attention merchants, creating dependence on the part of the new generation coming up. So there's also a part of education, especially for the upcoming, the Z Gen, that they truly take charge of their attention resources, because attention resources is what makes us human. Our decision-making, our memory building are all based on our attention. And they are, there's absolutely no regulation as to how these approaches that are being used these days are making a very large portion of the upcoming generation dependent on the social media without ability to focus and to literally reflect on their actions. But in any case, that's a totally separate issue. Excellent points were made. These are hopefully foresight topics. Every single speaker, I think, has brought to foresighters very good materials for study and research, and so this was one of them. We are going to conclude the session with Thomas Terner and David Nelson Gimple talking about energy as a leverage point for paradigm shifts. And this is coming from Berkeley. Yes.
Thank you. Is that microphone on?
Yeah, you put it on like that. Yeah, good. Yeah, Vito. Yeah,
It's on.
put this one.
This one?
Okay.
Hello? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, there are two things I wanna mention before I start. Firstly, as a child with attention deficit syndrome, I always struggle to sit still on the chair when I talk, because we're not going to change here probably either. And secondly, I'm fully aware that I have a very delicate time slot being allocated to me. That's the time slot shortly before lunch, where everyone is hopeful for the exciting lunch to come. Now, I'm not commenting on that, but what I'm saying is that I took this very much into consideration. So I prepared a presentation that is A, short and crisp, and B, contains mainly pictures that helps when sugar levels are very low. In return, I ask you to activate your remaining energy resources and to pay attention, because I really would like to hear your feedback on some of the ideas I want to present here. The presentation of today bears the topic energy as leverage point for paradigm shift. And I think it answers or speaks very well to some of the presentation we have heard, especially to yours, Fabien. I was very intrigued when you raised those questions that that you so well formulated, namely that it requires a systemic thinking, not only from a teleologic point of view, saying we think processes from the end, but we need to think of triggering points and the little steps that explain us how these shifts of systems are actually happening. My presentation tries to talk or tries to offer something of an answer. I'm very cautious here, but it might be something in that is worthwhile discussing further. When we talk about systems or paradigm shifts, then we talk about addressing not only one failure of a current system in place, but addressing the shortcomings as such. We can, for example, try to fight the negatives or negative external effects of a carbon-based economy by requiring end-of-pipe solutions. We might very well make the input of energy, carbon-intense energy carrier more expensive, but we will still not be able to get rid of the main issue, that is the addiction to carbon-intense energy carriers. System change, or paradigm shift, tries to deal with the system as such and helps to get rid of all of those downsides. A good example, maybe the best example of such thinking. Well, the thinking, firstly, is of course anything but novice to futurist and foresight thinking. 1950s with scholars of Luhmann and so forth, and thereafter had great highs there. The Club of Rome in the 1970s, 60s and 70s was very intrigued with finding solutions to issues of the capital system, like unemployment rate, education levels, child mortality, and so forth. And Forrester wrote, I find a really interesting paper in which he outlines that the issue, the leverage to all of those issues is economic growth. In the 70s, we talk about mainly organized economic growth with the state as dominant actor here. And if we can use this approach to as many parts in the world, then this would automatically sort out the issues that we are currently facing. Of course, we don't have anything to criticize this point, but we would like to offer a little bit more nuanced way look at things. Growth per se is one thing, but we should actually take a scalpel and work a little bit on the nitty-gritties of that. Our focus rests on the importance of technological development in the sphere of energy. We want to offer this as central leverage points that explain the system shifts that we have seen historically, and most likely those that we'll face in the future. One of the biggest changes to human existence happened around 4th millennium before Christ, when in Mesopotamia and Egypt, it's very difficult to identify exactly where it came from, we see the introduction of hydraulics to civilization and the access of biological energy through the domestication of animals and, of course, the invention of the yoke to make this animal usable in agricultural production. This allowed us to raise the productivity of agriculture to such a high degree that we saw an enormous explosion in population. So we converted these additional kilojoules that we generated into population growth. These people then formed cities, formed empires, formed our first big monuments that we saw, the emergence of the temple hierarchies, because this gift of additional kilojoules was still associated strongly with a form of deity, hence central focus on the temple monarchies. It took the Greeks then to offer alternative solutions that got rid of the central concept. So when we talked about cities, for example, this development in energy was the rise of the city. And it still is a debated point whether cities have been ultimately generated to allow and facilitate trade for these excess resources that we generated due to this energy innovation, or because the uneven distribution of these energy innovations triggered greed and led to war, and the city was a good way of defending yourself from those. The next massive development, again, triggered by energy technologies, the introduction of the steam engine. First for Thomas Newcomen as a fantastic way of pumping water out of coal mines, and ultimately as a mobile source of energy. The steam engine has done something to the world that is very hard to underestimate. Triggered the phase of industrial revolution and introduced one of the first absolute institution, which is the rise of the factory. The level of productivity that we have added to the individual in those 50 years is way beyond what we could have achieved in the thousands of years before that. Just to compare, it took 2 years of savings of a craftsman for a pair of trousers before the Industrial Revolution. Thereafter, we counted the value of a pair of trousers in hours of workload. The ultimate shift that led to this carbon-intoxicated economic growth that we have now happened in 1901 with the beginning of the Lucas Gasher. It is one of those highly productive oil spills that we had in Beaumont in Texas. It's not the first time we look for oil. We did that in the 1880s already in the east of what is now called the United States. But this was a commercial drill, a modern commercial drill, and it was highly effective. We got 100,000 barrels a day out of this oil well. Now, what does that mean? We have in the 1940s the emergence of the concept of an energy slave, which means that these additional sources of energy that we tap in as we progress from one system to the other equips us with certain energy slaves. These are amounts of energy available to us. And it is currently estimated that a person living in France, because the study was done in France, equals 400 energy slaves that we have with us available all the time in visual. I would like to introduce here a chart that depicts here the energy consumption, and it shows quite nicely the massive impact that the Lucas Gasher I mentioned before has. So in the year 1900, I'm not sure if I can point. Is that a pointer? No, maybe it's not. But anyway, you see the orange line picking up from the 1900s. This is when we actually tap into the Lucas Gasher. And in 1903, we have at Ford Motor Company this idea we could build actually a car that runs on this petrol. In 1912, the Model D comes onto place. 1927, we already have 15 million of these cars out there. The reason was, of course, because next to Standard Oil, the company that was starting to get hold of oil production, we had another tycoon coming into place. It is Mr. Carnegie, who had recently gotten control over the railway lines, assured that to Ford that they could actually deliver oil and its derivatives to any parts of the United States, and hence this was the optimal way to fuel this next generation of consumer production, like the car. Another example that actually explains quite nicely the connection of energy technology with GDP is visible here. So you can see that the dotted line is economic growth, and this mirrors quite nicely the beginning, the available of biomass, and then thereafter of coal, and after coal from the 1920 onwards, it takes the same slope of crude oil. Thereafter, in the 60s, when we had this massive drive at natural gas, it's also the time when we have this beginning of the so-called Dutch disease, because the Dutch tap into their natural gas resources of their seashores, and continue to mirror then ultimately biomass or others. And if that chart would continue a little bit longer, I'm quite sure that the GDP growth would very much be in line with the growth of installed capacity from photovoltaics or wind energy. This here is a very important chart I'd like to draw your attention to. Namely, whilst the orange line depicts the real GDP growth, the blue line, the expenditures that we pay to tap into those energies. And it's quite interesting that from the 1980s onwards, you see a falling slide. And the reason for that is because we had applied energy efficiency technologies to minimize the so-called energy metabolism. Energy metabolism means when I pump 1,000 megajoule out of the ground in oil, what usable energy / exergy actually reaches the consumer. And we're currently sitting at 26% of the kilojoule that we pump out of megajoule that we pump out of the ground being available. And this is an energy. I'm not talking about exergy. That is, again, very different concept. It will be much lower. And what is surprising is that somewhere in the 2000s, we realized that our efficient technology, our efficient enhancing technology don't do the job anymore. We see that the amount of a GDP that we pay to get access to additional energy starts to rise and has ever continued doing so. This is partly because in 2001 we have a massive, due to the terror attacks, we have increasing externalities and insecurity due to global insecurities that rose. But also because a shift in accessible energy sources that there were. This here is a chart that depicts this quite nicely. And it shows here the dark black scale is the net energy that is available for society for use. And the gray outer lines is the energy used to procure this very specific energy. The red dotted line here sits at 14. This is what we currently estimate is the minimum energy return on investment that you need to get out to keep an economy in its steady state. Beyond that, you basically destroy wealth. And you can see that, of course, historic oil and gas fields, this is mainly the Saudi Arabian areas where it's very easy to access, infrastructure is there and pumps out quite easily. You'll see then on the above the energy net cliff, there are bitumen of tar sands, or they're still highly intense corn-based ethanol. What you see is a massive move in the photovoltaic energy and the wind energy. What you see is they move up quite rapidly out of the energy cliff towards competing with the established sources of energy. And this is the percentage of energy out to the energy invested. This is still completely free of externalities that are on the game. The externalities are best depicted here. When we try to grab externalities, we use the concept of pre-tax / post-tax. Yeah? So the subsidies in pre-tax that you see on your left-hand side are declining. So these are the ones where basically we put incentives, we lower the cost of input factors to make certain industries more competitive. These were done in the 80s, for example, diesel heavily subsidized to keep fisher fleets alive. But this we have given up now quite a bit. We have instead moved to the right side, the post-tax energy subsidies. And that basically means we are covering a lot. Someone needs to pay for the not so good side, but the evil side of the use of these types of technologies. Now you see the rise here is quite interesting. We are now sitting at 6.5%. It's kind of probably underestimated, people say. The reason why that is not because a barrel of oil got more toxic, but because we simply have better means to properly grasp the real damage that oil and so forth are doing. And in certain forms of energy, like nuclear energy, we simply cannot do the calculation to the very end because nobody knows what happens with the nuclear toxic waste. So we still have to kind of keep that out as the big unknown. But it's quite interesting to show. We show here we use 7.5 up to 8% of the GDP to generate the energy, and we use 6.5% of the GDP as a subsidy for what it costs to run in a world on coal and petroleum. And these numbers are, as you can see from the developments, clearly rising and moving against the classical carbon-intense energy carriers. So this is what we believe a way to identify it. And the point is that those negative externalities have not been calculated into the real cost, but ultimately they will. A society has to calculate them in. So if you are thinking back to the earlier biology-driven economies, your main question was, on my available land, do I use it for producing cows or horses? Cows is food, horses is energy. So that trade-off was actually a kind of a quite simplistic question of optimization. There beyond that, when you tapped into coal, when you had enormous levels of dust and pollution in cities, to oil and other carbon-intense carriers that led to global warming / to nuclear energy, where you have an enormous amount of externalities that you simply cannot calculate in. But we want to add to this another step, namely, if you decide not to make the system shift to the alternative energy sources, you're missing out on the already happening growth that we see when we see from one step to the others. And for example, these are 20 top energy-related startups. They use the blockchain technology. They are not happening if you run coal, if you generate electricity out of coal. They rely on atomized, decentralized energy production. So the system shift that we have tried to outline here with our graphics and charts on trying to get a hold of the real costs of running an economy that is driven by carbon-intense energy sources. If you stay in this old paradigm, you will surely lose out on the exponential growth that always happens when you move from one paradigm shift to the other. These paradigm shifts will not be adapted equally, have never been, but the opportunity costs are rising enormously. Some food for thought before we go for lunch. Thank you very much for your attention.
Most insightful and absolutely wonderful. I would like to watch it over and over. So that's fantastic. We are few minutes early, so we have all the speakers. If you have some questions, because I couldn't take any questions to our wonderful speakers, please use those few minutes, then in 4 minutes we're gone. So let's see who gets a question and gets to answer. Any questions for any of our speakers? Looks like they're very...
seems to be in disarray. Right?
Yes. Well, thank you very much. That was an extraordinary